You know, I have a long history of mysticism behind me. It's not something I'm particularly interested in divulging, perhaps ever. A lot of people that are in that seem like they can't shut up about the kinds of things that they've seen or thought they've seen. But for a person like me that doesn't easily make friends, when I establish a kind of social niche, I'm pretty hesitant to threaten it with the divulgence of mystical experiences, especially with groups of people that I find myself most at home with. The level of thinking that I'm interested in embracing and having friends embrace tend to lend themselves to a sort of domineering skepticism that would dismiss a lot of what I have to say. It's for that reason that I think I spend so much time in logic, working with the mechanics of argument and these kinds of things. Not divulging much of my own theories because that's not worth anything, really. It really isn't. It really isn't. You have to come to these things in your own terms. Because as soon as I make a theory or something, someone will say, well, that's not very clear. You're what Dennett calls murky. I think is what one person said. And give me a break. You know, people are saying, well, what's your worldview? What's your worldview? And I say, I don't really know. This is kind of where I'm at. Well, that's murky. Well, Dennett can kiss my ass in many different ways, really. Anyway, I've been thinking a lot recently about my next move in my private life. You know, should I go back to school? Should I move to a different town? And basically, it looks like I'm moving to Washington. But these things are never always as simple as they might seem. I've been drawn to Manhattan for the past few months, but I basically gave up on the idea, I guess on account of fear. You know, I went to Japan, lived in Japan, but I didn't really fear that. I knew that Japan was safe. I knew that those were law-abiding people, just culturally. The idea of going to New York and having to be street smart is a little intimidating. But I've always been drawn there, and I don't know if it's just the mystique of New York or something more. About the time that I was fairly certain that I wasn't going to go to New York, I had a dream that I was the student of a Japanese swordmaster. I wrote about it in the blog, so you can read it for the full story. I'll leave you a link. But long story short, this guy gave me advice that was direct and meaningful. It wasn't awkward or odd or mysterious or, you know, ooh, if you interpret it this way or that. It was pretty straightforward. The feelings I had were pretty straightforward. The impression I got, you know, these kinds of things. And it would seem to me, anyway, in context with this larger consideration, that I ought to go to Manhattan. And about a day or so after that dream, I decided I wouldn't go to Manhattan. Well, it didn't sit with me very well, and not just because of the dream, but for other considerations. I decided to take myself up to the canyon one of these nights, just a night like this, and go to the campsite up there, build myself a fire. I brought some popcorn, a lawn chair, sleeping bag to use as a blanket, and just hang out with the fire and the stars and contemplate. The whole thing was just an elaborate way, I guess, of focusing my single intention of what should I do? Should I go to New York? Should I not? Should I try to get a place in Manhattan? Should I not? Now, it's not like I haven't tried. Going to Manhattan is tricky business. It's very expensive, and most of the roommates on these roommate websites that have gotten back to me were scams. They wanted my personal information to forward on to their lawyers. And whenever I asked them to just give me their lawyer's contact information so I could forward it straight to their office, I didn't hear another word from them. So it's not like I haven't tried to make this work, or I'm just waiting for the thing to just fall in my lap. But there are some considerations. Anyway, by the end of that night, again, I was pretty convinced that I had to go to New York, that was just what was right. And it was a few days after that, about a few days after that, I guess, that I decided, no, I wasn't going to go to New York the second time. And that time, I contacted Jordan, that most of you probably know, Veritas at Libertas. Libertas? I forget now. His real name's Jordan. I know your real name, right? I don't know. Screen names are a anomaly to me. Anyway, he and his girlfriend offered me a place to stay while I got myself situated in Washington State. There was a circus guild up there that that had interest in me writing a blog for them, keeping a newsletter, these kinds of things, and I could possibly look into producing for different productions they have, and one of the leaders has their own kind of little juggling act going on, and all that stuff is cool. For people that don't have context for that, I want to go and join the circus. That's the context. Anyway, they've been very supportive and helpful and kind and everything, and it looks like it's going to happen. But damn, nothing's ever easy. I don't know. Check out that blog post. See if it resonates with you at all. To be perfectly honest, I was asked to watch a lecture by Thomas Campbell. This is a guy that wrote My Big Toe, and I sat through it. It's a long lecture, and there were a lot of things being said with very little justification. And I understand it was just a lecture, but holy shit, I thought I could get out there. This guy goes fucking nuts. He goes on and on and on and on and on. Is it all true? Is it not true? A lot of what he had to say I was familiar with. I mean, I had a lot of what he had to say had to do with out-of-body experiences, and I've had out-of-body experiences. And what he was saying was lining up with my own experience. But he had plenty more to say about it than what I ever experienced. And I got thinking about it, like, my God, all that stuff that was happening to me. The friend of mine that had a broken ankle, that didn't have a broken ankle that next morning. The people that were coming out of comas and cancer was curing, and I had just the wildest dreams and then waking nightmares of like demons and ghosts and all this kind of bullshit, and then out-of-body experiences, one after another. This all happened like the last 2 years of high school and the first 2 years of college, and nothing has happened since. It was a time in my life where I isolated myself basically from everyone and meditated very diligently. And a lot of those experiences have just kind of been suppressed over the time. And watching this lecture just reawoke everything. Just bubbled to the surface. God, it's like, talk about a job for a psychoanalyst. Anyway, it shook me up. And you who pointed me to that lecture, you know who you are. And I just have to say, I am very, I don't know. I'm very upset. Take care, guys.